Has anyone around the table identified areas that they think personally may be more or less appropriate for us to apply this 50% threshold? I mean, from your individual knowledge of areas, are there comments that you want to make about areas you know of?
I think we have an issue which is emerging, which is we're starting to look at the possibility of estate regeneration and doing some master planning work, which is happening currently in Churchill, which I think is maybe not part of this policy currently. Is that right?
Yeah, not currently.
Anyway, in terms of just making the point, it could well be that to do any regeneration work in essentially it's a residential area apart from Church Street itself. To do any regeneration work there, we're probably looking at bringing residential accommodation into that. It could be that this policy, if it was rigidly applied, would stop that sort of regeneration process, housing-led regeneration process happening. So some degree of flexibility around housing estates, I think, would be something that we would find welcome.
I think it would be seen as a planning gain by developers, another cost on getting the plan efficient. So if you did think that 50% living was worth retaining, then it's perhaps worth thinking of offsetting it by a lower affordable housing threshold, or just something that's going to say to the developer, although there may be a cost in this, you would be saving by not having to contribute to X, Y or Z.
And what about saying having more flexibility in the 50-50 split?
Yeah.
So you had 70% residential, 30% business.
Or the other way around.
All the other way around.
I mean, one of our priorities in this area is employment. And by employing people, we cut down on all the things like crime and family problems. So therefore, it may be appropriate to have a different split, and I'll come back to my flexibility point, but it may be more appropriate and encourage a developer to actually go in and develop it, say 70% industrial, 30% residential, and on the grounds that this will actually improve the area enormously if we can get people working. And working is as important as housing, because there's no point in having housing if you're going to sit there with being unemployed. So it's a very fine balance between the two.
Wouldn't the Amberley site be quite good for your 70-30?
I don't know, but what at the moment, what we're thinking about is the general policy, and I'm very concerned that we should encourage more small businesses who would find it acceptable to have their little white van outside and come down to wherever it might be and do their job, because they would employ people locally, either as a receptionist or as an assistant electrician or one of our new apprentices, whatever it may be. But we've got to actually encourage more employment in that area to create this terrible situation we have at the moment with great unemployment. And that to me is more important than providing, if you like, more housing.
I just say the existing UDP policy says no more than 50% housing, so therefore you could have had that split onto the existing policy, but I don't think we've ever had applications.
I did have one question of Graham, or any planning officer. Can you tell me, is it possible to use a swaps situation? This goes back to the housing point, where one site might be very appropriate for housing, but another site might be appropriate slightly for housing, but more for commercial. Can we do a swap on it at all?
The issue on swaps, I think, is constrained by two general factors. We have made various arrangements. One is the argument, which is a bit legalistic, that comes down to vicinity. Are the two things in similar areas or the same area even? And because the other one, which is a particular problem for the City Council always, particularly in an area like this, not so much in the central area, is to prove the deliverability of two sites. So you would require that one developer to have absolute control over those two sites and to agree to carry the schemes out in such a way that you absolutely got what you were signing up for. It's that practicality which probably restricts the number of opportunities that are really available. If someone came to us, however, with that proposal, we would work very hard to make sure it could work or not.
There you go.
And man security.
He says yes tomorrow, have you seen?
Still at London know this.
Yeah, we know that very well. We're halfway through negotiations.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want anyone to think it's straightforward, simply because experience has shown for all parties that it isn't. Yeah. But it is available.
Yeah. And we totally understand the fears about deliverability. It's perfectly reasonable. I think, from my point of view, we're always in favour of more flexibility. However, there are, bizarrely enough, you can go too far the other extreme where there are no guidelines at all. The whole page is just blank, and the planning process takes forever because no one knows where you're starting. So equally, we do understand that you've got to have a set of guidelines, a starting point, and then you've got to use a very good argument to diverge from that. Otherwise, no one knows where the hell they're starting, and it takes forever. So,
I know you want to move on, just one comment. I think that I'm really optimistic about the economic development opportunities in an area like Church Street. We're already seeing signs of companies relocating there from the East End and calling it the new East End in the West. So I think there's a lot that we can support through planning policy. And so I think the 50-50 sounds sensible. But I think Dan's right, within an estate where there is no economic opportunities, obviously you don't want to start putting shops at the bottom of estates that are never going to be filled. And by the same token, on main arterial routes through these neighbourhoods, I would imagine that more than the 50-50 split would be better, certainly on, say, Edgware Road. I'd love to see that, I don't know, 70-30 or something.